Yes, good day, good day, good day. Hey people, welcome to this How to Play brackets pass PD3 Danish Exam. Just to give you a heads up, this meeting is being recorded, so if you don't want to be on camera, be sure to hide yourself. And I'm going to keep you on mute for now, but at some point I will open it up so we can also chat a bit together. So, proven strategies, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of beautiful things on the screen here, and we're going to get into these little exam hacks. The PD3 exam is a game. Once you know the rules and controls, you can win. Yeah, I'm coming at it from this angle of okay, if we understand what controls we need to hit, then we can pass it with ease. Stay to the end because I have a little exclusive offer for everybody here. And it's great to see so many people on Valentine's Day. Oh, that's amazing. It makes me so happy. And I want to start off by introducing you, if you don't know who I am. Here I've written DT Hollow. DT Hollow. The DT team. Just me. I'm a team of one, pretty much. I've had different colleagues, different people over the years that come. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they go, which can be kind of sad. But that's the life of an event header, that is, entrepreneur, event header. So this is another version of me, who some of you might know, may have seen. His name was Dr. Fusk, Dr. Fusk, Dr. Cheat. And if I don't know you, also feel free to write in the chat and let me know who are you, where are you from. I see some familiar faces here. Lou, Josh, John Joe is here, Alexander, or Alessandra, I think your name is, right? So I know a few of you, but some of you I don't. So, hvor kommer du fra? Hvor er du lige nu? Let me know in the chat box. I'm just going to take a little swig of coffee. And as you'll notice, this webinar is pretty much going to be in English. Det kan være, at jeg blander. Maybe I'm going to mix it up a little bit. But the main reason for that is, this PD3 stuff can be a bit heavy. I don't want anything to be lost in translation. And I think that's the most important thing when we're talking about this exam, and often when we're learning Danish, is we understand what's going on. Right? I've had an experience where I was trying to learn Polish, and it was from zero. But the woman's style was, she had that thing of, it's in Polish 100% of the time. And I felt a little bit stressed about it. It was like some things I felt like I needed you to tell me so I know what's going on. I don't have to always to stress my brain. Anyway, that's the point, right? So we're using English as our help language, and today we're just going to relax and make sure we know what you understand what I'm talking about, and you can also ask me any questions you need to. So, DT Historia, how did I get to where I am today? And I was thinking about it, and I realized it's pretty crazy story, actually. You see here, I started way back when as the Danish guru. That was sort of my first persona as a Danish teacher. If you didn't hear my story before, basically, I learned Danish as a second language, just as you have, or you are doing. But there came a point where I started to take some classes with a guy, but we just connected right away. And he was like, well, you seem to already speak Danish. So what about if we just kind of work together? Well, actually, I'm going a bit ahead of myself here. The English guru was before I met him. Before I started taking lessons, I was already making blog posts, trying to create Danish content, because it was a way for me to get an output. Often we get loads of input, but sometimes we're not so good at getting the output. And that's really important, to try and create something, whatever it might be, if it's a poem or a text or a blog or whatever. So I started doing that as the English guru. And I had an Instagram back then, but I wasn't so into Instagram. So I think I had a Blogspot post. Anyone remember Blogspot? Let me know in the chat if you ever used Blogspot. Is that still a thing? People still use Blogspot? I really don't know. Anyway, so I was kind of like this the English guru, connecting Danish and English, because I've always been a bit fascinated by how Danish and English sort of fit together. So here's a picture of me in the middle with 2 broken arms. That was something unfortunate that happened to me once. I København in Copenhagen, got hit off of my bike and broke both my arms at the same time. I remember going in the shower with plastic bags on my freaking arms. It was not fun. Anyway, from there, I started working with this guy who was actually my Danish teacher, but I think we only had maybe, I don't know, 10 classes together. And he had this channel of his own, but eventually we sort of morphed his channel into our channel, which became known as A Taste of Danish. And actually, my good friend Birgit, also a Danish teacher, she was helping me a lot behind the scenes of trying to form some kind of brand. And this Taste of Danish sort of period was a really creative period in my life. I don't know, from 2017 to 2020, something like that, where we made a load of really creative, fascinating videos. Not always stuff that people wanted to see, but we enjoyed it, and that was the most important thing. And I got loads of stuff out of it. So you can actually see here, Dr. Fusk, who was on the previous page, the guy with the mustache, he was actually incorporated into the logo. You can see me flying there with the hat and the glasses and the little rocket, which I still think is amazing. Is amazing. But this Taste of Danish thing was always a bit confusing because it makes you think, oh, is this about food, or what is this about? A taste of Danish? Should I be trying smørrebrød or the kartofler? So I was always a little bit, what's going on? Anyway, me and this guy eventually went our separate ways, and I started focusing much more on my own channel. I already had my channel at the side of his, but it was always a bit of a conflict. It was always like, nah, I'm working with him, but we're doing the same. Where am I? So I got my own channel. Apart from that, I was working with him. I also was teaching. I started to sort of give some private sessions. And one company that I worked for, you can see the little logo down here. It says LTES. That's actually a Greek company, and they were also amazing. They're based in Greece. I don't remember exactly where or how they were finding students, but they threw a bunch of students at me, and I met a lot of people and got a lot of experience. And it was difficult at the start. It was really hard to figure out what's the best way to teach and what works and what doesn't work. And I tried a bunch of things. I'm very fortunate that most of my experiences have been really positive with people. Every so often there's a person that you just sort of collide with and it doesn't go so well. But I learned a lot out of it. Anyway, another thing I did was I taught kids. I was teaching them actually English. You can see here, Dada ABC. It sounds stupid, the name, Dada. It was also a lot of fun, a creative outlet, because, with kids, you can just really just go wild and do whatever. And I've taken a lot of that into my more, adult world. Actually, I prefer working with adults. And then the top of the screen here to the right, this is me in Copenhagen. I also created a company called Viking Cycling Copenhagen. Explore, laugh, learn Danish, and gain speed. This was because I've been working so long in front of a computer, and I was getting a bit like, oh, my eyes are burning out, and I want to do something a bit more active. What can I do? So I combined my passions, because I'd previously worked also as a tour guide in Copenhagen, and I got this idea of, okay, what if I sort of combined my love of Copenhagen, the history of Copenhagen, which I know a lot about, and also my love of Danish language. So that was kind of my thing. And it was very laid back, very down to earth, but I sort of tried to show people how Copenhagen and Denmark also fit together with English language and Danish language. And I also taught people a bit of Danish while we were on the tour, because these were people that were visiting for the first time, more often than not. So I tried to give them something to take away. After the tour, they could then go to the supermarket and, say thanks and you too and how's it going, that sort of stuff. And that just only stopped because of coronavirus. Of course, Corona hit, lockdowns, no more tourists were coming. And now we're all the way right up to, this was 2019, I can see here. But I was doing that until 2021. I first moved to Denmark in around 2011. And in 2021, I decided, okay, I need to go and be with my son in Argentina. So that's where I've been since 2021, going a bit back and forth. So now I'm sort of in South America, But I love this story. I'm an Englishman in South America teaching Danish. The hell happened here? Anyway, that was sort of DanishTube backstory. If you didn't know any of that stuff, now you know what I'm about. I tried this site called Preply or Preply, however you want to say it. Here it says 365 days. I took this picture a couple of weeks back, so actually some more days have passed, which really blows my mind. Because it says here, hours taught 1,117, lessons taught 1,213, and I've received 22 5-star ratings on Preply. So that really makes me wonder, wow, how many people have I taught in total since 2017? That's a lot. But this website has also been a godsend for meeting new people. I know a bunch of you actually that are here have met me through this site, and loads of people pop up on the side and are like, "Oh, I've seen you on YouTube, so I thought I would reach out and see what's going on or whatever." So people seem to find me a lot now via YouTube. Right? There was a time when I used to put a lot of things out via Facebook and whatever, but now people seem to find their way to me via my podcast, and so on and so on. Okay, let's have a little bit more here, and we're going to get onto this PD3 stuff. This is a picture of my table from, I don't know what year, maybe 2018, I would guess. And the reason I have this picture is because people often ask me, how the hell did you learn Danish? And they often think that it's some kind of magical pill that I took. And I admit I've had some advantages, maybe. English being my native language, I think that's an advantage. I'm very musically minded. I am very good at repeating things that I hear. You know, if I want to sing like Bowie, I'm not saying I can do it as well as him, but I can impersonate him. I'm quite good at that sort of thing. But I also studied my ass off. I used to wake up at 6 a.m. to read books or to do some exercises, and I've watched a shit ton of movies. I've listened to loads of music. I've read articles and books. I've got a bunch of books behind me that I'm always sort of still now trying to read and constantly learn. So I'm sort of on a journey with my students, which I also think is very fascinating. I don't want to stop saying blah, blah. Here's a bunch of other stuff that I did. I made some books. You may have seen them. Danish Bible is now my baby. I also have the book right here. I have to move this Tommy gun that my son has left here. That's cool. Just going to show you that because that's just pretty awesome. Here's the Danish Bible. This is your go-to guide for Danish grammar. It's constantly being updated. If you want to know all the basics, you can get it absolutely free on my site. Just put in your email address and you can get the ebook. Otherwise, you can go to Amazon and get the physical book. In the old version, I forgot to put numbers on the pages. So I've updated now. So I'm sorry if anyone out there has bought the book and then they're like, oh, looking in the table of contents, page 24. And then they're like, what's page 24? There's no freaking numbers here. I'm human, okay? Just like you. So that's my love for DanishTube and what I do. It's been a long journey to get to here where I am now in 2025 to be presenting all this kind of amazing stuff to you. But I just want to give a shout out to everybody that has invested their time, their energy, and of course their hard-earned money in me and what I can give to you. I didn't used to do this PD3 stuff, you know. I used to be like, that's not really my style. But then I sort of got into it. And maybe about 3-4 years ago, I really started like studying it a bit more because I've done it myself, so I know all about it, but I never really taught it. But then more and more people kept asking me about it. So I realized, okay, people sort of keep asking me, so I'm going to go for it. And now I actually really enjoy it. I think it's really a lot of fun. You can learn loads of stuff. So let's get into it. The biggest mistakes PD3 students make. Many students fail PD3 just because they don't really prepare correctly. So we're going to look at the 3 biggest mistakes that I've noticed people make and talk about how we can avoid those mistakes and basically give you some tips that you can use. Mistake number 1 is blah, 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 which I'm apparently really good at because I've already been talking for way too long. So I'm sorry about that. Too much fluff, unstructured, and you get lost in the maze of info, which basically I just mean like you're talking yourself around in circles. You don't have any sort of structure, and you end up saying loads of things without really saying anything at all. most common thing I hear is sometimes people say a lot of really great things, but sort of they're just going around in circles and not getting to the point. And this can be on the written side of the exam, or it can also be the spoken side of the exam. So what you need to do is be very precise and concise, keep it very simple for yourself, and get on top of the topic. Don't let the topic sort of control you and have you going around in circles. Control the topic. Once you've learned about something, you know about it. So then it's just a case of, well, how can I make that structured? And we're going to break that down a bit more. Mistake number 2 is misunderstanding something, of course. Another thing I've experienced in my classes is I ask somebody a question, they give me an answer, and it's a great answer. I'm like, that was awesome what you just said. You had some really nice sentences, but it wasn't the answer to my question. Have you experienced that? Let me know in the chat box if I've ever said that to you during class. It's certainly something that's happened a bunch of times. I always find it kind of fascinating, kind of funny. So misunderstanding and then rushing for the answer, going ahead of yourself. Sometimes you think, oh, it's like, there you go. You need to try to find a bit. I'm just going to drink some coffee. Find a bit of zen. Find a bit of relaxation in all the stress of an exam, which I know is really difficult. And strip away any uncertainty. We need to be certain about stuff. So we need to know, how can I analyze a question well in order to really understand what is it they're looking for here? How can I stay composed and inquisitive rather than a bit unsure and a bit scared of what's going on? And essentially, you just need to understand how to perform each one of these tests. Right? It's as simple as that. Makes sense, but you'd be surprised how many people go rush ahead of themselves. Mistake number 3 is time management. Simply, you don't have a lot of time. It might sound like a lot of time, especially if you're going to perform all parts of the exam in one day, but really it goes really fast. And I think that's the case with an exam. Skipping relevant information. If you don't get that relevant information, or you don't take note, sort of physically take note, and you should be scribbling, making notes and stuff, then you might miss something that's really essential to the question, for example. And apart from that, another thing could be you're reading way too much. You're actually putting too much effort in. So then it's a case of, what's the balance? How much do I need to do and what don't I need to do? So we need to work out, how do we work within the time frame? How do we read necessary information and skip the rest? The rest is just kind of blah, blah, fluff. I'm going to show you a bit more about that. So essentially, there's some very specific rules. What are the rules to the task? And when you know this very clearly, you can study smarter and not harder, and just make it easy for yourself. Once you know the controls, you almost have the cheat codes, then you can easily, there's something flying in the air there, answer and perform well and pass, essentially. That's all it's about. And a way you could do that is by using very pre-made sentences and by using a very specific structure. And when you combine this, it becomes a finishing move. That's how you probably going to end up impressing the examiner, actually. So let's look at these mistakes. The first one was blah, blah. The way you can avoid blah, blah is by using connectors, or what can I say, fixed phrases. For example, a very simple example here. Yeah, me, not at. These can feel a little bit robotic at the start, but once you get used to those phrases, then it becomes very natural. Yeah, me, not at. You can hear there's a different tone to when I say, yeah, me, not at. Sounds very robotic. Versus, yeah, me, not at. Da, 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 da. It's very natural. Once you have these phrases sort of in your toolbox, if you like, then that's what you need to use. You start thinking of the language rather than a lot of confusing things you have to put together. Think of it in blocks, in chunks. Det er en god idé, fordi and I'll show you a bunch of other fixed phrases, fixed things that you can use. Apart from that, there's a 3-point system. This can work with both the written and the spoken part of the exam, which gives you a very, very clear structure. And it makes it much more easier for you to perform well. And I'm going to show you how to do it. And the 5-point system is your overall structure. Again, you could use this for the written part. I have more focus maybe on the spoken part of the exam here, but I realized actually when making this that you could use it for both. So let's take a look at what that is. 3-point structure. An example could be often in the exam, PD3 stuff, you have this yeah eller nej, for imod, fordele, ulemper. It's usually that sort of thing. So rather than going back and forth between this and this and that, against I'm for it, I'm against, and blah, 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 you need to keep yourself very structured. Stick to one side and then go over to the other side. For example, let's say here's just one example. If your answer is yeah, my answer to the first question is yeah, and I can expand upon that for D. I could expand on that one more time. Måske. And there's my 3 points. And I've answered the question in a very specific, clear, and simple way, rather than getting lost in how do I formulate myself. Let's take another example so it's clear. Spørgsmål. We have a question here. Mine kolleger forstyrrer mig på arbejde. Skal jeg sige noget til them? This is actually an example from one of the tests. So my colleagues are disturbing me at work. Should I say something to them? So now you have to be able, the point of it is to express your opinion and say why. Pretty much. It might have been in response to an email, I think. So 3 points. Det lyder som en god idé at sige noget til dine kolleger. Det må være svært at koncentrere dig, så that's the fordi. And the måske er det andre, der også har det sådan. That's a very, very well put out, sort of comprehensive answer to the question, right? Yeah, I think it's a good idea. You say something. It must be difficult to concentrate. That's why you should say something. And then, actually, maybe there's some other people that also feel like that. So, yeah, why not? Take another example. Here we have sound, which means exclamation. So now we have a statement. Der er sket en markant stigning i udenlandske arbejdstagere. Very typical PD3 language, right? There's been an increase in foreign workers. Answer. I'm giving the reason for it. I'm expanding upon that, and then I'm giving an example. En af hovedårsagerne til denne udvikling kan være udover eksempelvis get the point, right? 3 points. Whatever words you use, not necessarily important, but again, we have these very fixed sort of words here. Very simple words actually here. Der udover, exemplivis, and that's a very, very good way to structure it. Here's one more example, and this is the one that I think I've used the most. Udenlandsk arbejdskraft har både positive og negative konsekvenser. That's the statement. Foreign labor has both positive and negative consequences. Now I need to tell, because this is what it's about, right? Often the PD3 thing is when you're in the written part, especially, you're assessing something, and in the spoken part, you're kind of doing the same. You're showing that you can build up some kind of argument as a sort of almost neutral bystander, not necessarily giving your opinion as such, although you might, but you're backing up your reasoning to why you've said something. Anyway, på den ene side, det kan også, og på den anden side. And again, that's just one example of what you could do it. I've sort of mixed it with these three points here. Another way of doing it, which I think is really effective, is if we're now talking about positives and negatives, is to first go with the positives and then give 3 points. Der er nogle fordele. Det her, og det her, og det her. For det første, for det andet, for det tredje. Og der er også nogle ulemper. 1, 2, 3. Of course, sometimes those positives and negatives sort of match and go together. So you might feel like it makes sense to say, selvom det kan være godt, kan det også. That's up to you. Personally, I like to say all the positives and then all the negatives, or the other way around. Start with the negative and the positive. Often that's a good thing to do. So essentially, this 3-point system is something you can use throughout the exam to give yourself very clear structure and to answer with precision. On top of that, we have this 5-point system. or rather 5-point structure. And this is very much for the written part where you have to, again, assess something. There's, for example, a task where you have to describe a diagram. For example, we had this thing of there's been an increase in foreign labor. Now you have to assess why that could be. So it's often the case of like, where the hell do I start? So I've written here, you have 5 things you need to do. Inlearning, an intro. Number 2, Baugrund. Why is it at all relevant to talk about this? Number 3, argument. This is the main body of either your written sort of, what would it be, an article as such, your written assignment, or your speech, depending. Upsumming, and then outro. So what is that? Inlearning, intro, is nothing more than a very short, simple thing of saying what it is you're going to talk about. So if we take the spoken part as an example, I'm going to tell you about this. Jeg skal fortælle dig lidt om. And that's really important, because if you don't say that, then the person in front of you has got to figure out themselves, what is he talking about? He's talking about that thing. It's a really simple thing. I'm going to tell you about this, foreign labor in Denmark. Baugrund. Why is it at all necessary to talk about this? It's necessary because of this and this and this. I've actually just uploaded a video to YouTube and it's a part of the upcoming course, which I'm going to show you at the end, where I've spoken. I've given an example where I've used this structure, and you can see it very clearly how it works. Number 3, now I come into my argument, and this is where I can use my 3-point system. So we have the 3-point system within the 5-point structure, right? So now I'm going to build up my argument. Okay, on the one hand, it's good foreign labor, let's say, because of this and this and this. But on the other hand, it's not so cool because of this and this and this. Opsummating comes next, and that's your maybe suggestion, what needs to happen to improve the situation, what we could do as a society, depends on the topic. And your outro, again, is just simply saying, well, that was it, finished. Don't just say, oh, that was it, I'm finished. But you'd say maybe, if it was the speech, tak fordi du lytter med. Det var alt, som jeg havde. Tak fordi I lytter med. And you've ended it in a clear way. And again, this just gives you a bit of peace of mind that you know how to start, you know how to end, because there's nothing worse than giving a speech and then getting to a point where you're like, I think I've sort of finished. Well, that was it. So this just gives you think you finished, perfect, just end it. Just say that I've finished, that was it, thanks. Then you've ended it cleanly. Within that 3-point system and 5-point structure, you start using these fixed phrases that we've already mentioned. So again, you have almost like an inception going on here. You have a structure within a structure. It becomes like what can I say? A little bit of a tree with different branches. For the first, for the andet, for the tredje. It's a great example for the 3-point system because you've aimed firstly, secondly, and thirdly. These fixed expressions are just going to make you sail through it. And essentially, it's going to be the deadly knockout combo. They're not going to be able to, they'll be like, shit, you did it so freaking well, man. 5-point structure, within that 3-point structure, and within that fixed phrases. That's just an explosion of, well, I've just done everything that you want me to do, and give me the 12. It's amazing. It's really great. I'm not saying it's easy to do it, especially the spoken part or the written part on the day. It's actually really, really difficult because being in that situation, any exam situation, is stressful. And you often forget everything you've learned. Hopefully you're not going to do that. Hopefully this is going to give you something to hold on to. Let's do number 2, and that was misunderstanding, misforståelse. So if we take again, let's say the spoken part of the exam is you describe some images, and then there's some follow-up questions. Let's say you don't quite understand the question, or you think you have, but you're not sure. Not a good idea to start answering. And you can ask. And this is what I say to people also in real life. In general, we have a tendency when we don't understand to sort of break down. And I've talked about this in my classes. So let me know in the chat if this has been your experience. When you say something and somebody doesn't understand you, you automatically think you're the problem. But it could very possibly be that the other person pronounced it weird, there's some background noise, there's 1,000 things it could be. In the exam situation, though, it's likely going to be, you just didn't quite catch it. So, having very simple questions like, kan du gentage, undskyld, hvad betyder, sorry, can you repeat that? Or, I think that's maybe the only question you might need to use, to be fair. You might ask in any way, undskyld, hvad mener du med, I believe that the examiner would only reformulate the question slightly. They would keep it as close to the same question as possible, but they'll reword it in hopes that if they reword it, you will understand it. And often that's the case. When you ask somebody, kan du gentage, hvad mener du? Usually they don't say exactly the same. Usually they reword it slightly, and you're like, yeah, okay, now I get it. It's very, very natural. So you can use that in the exam. Another thing of not understanding or misunderstanding is there's some key words to look for. Nøgleord. For example, undtagen, which means apart from. I've seen it loads of times now in the exams where one of the questions is, what is this thing apart from this thing? And if you ignore that word undtagen or you don't know it, then you're likely going to maybe put the wrong answer. Another one is udover, which means apart from. So apart from this thing, what is this? Now I can't think of a good example that I've seen. There was something about a Viking fort, I think. What is special about this Viking fort apart from this thing? And then you have to go to a text and find that thing. But of course, apart from that, the other one is your answer. And one other thing I've seen is this word både, meaning both. And the example was, what did both people say? So you have to go through a text and find something that both people said. So essentially that's it, right? There's some very, very specific keywords in the questions that you need to take note of. And I would say you need to underline. Don't just read a question, dissect the question. When you look at it, there's some words that are just blah, blah again. You could delete them out of the question. What is the important part of this question? Both Mads and Caroline have to have said this, because in this example is a really great example because there were three things and they both mentioned one of them, and then one or the other had mentioned the other two. So you could very quickly misunderstand and say, it was that one, but it wasn't. And lastly, knowing what to correct, having some kind of thing in your mind. If we're again talking about the written part now, knowing what to correct. What am I even looking for? You can write a text and then be like, I'm going to check it. But what am I even looking for? So I'm actually going to give you this secret Danish grammar formula, as I've called it. It's probably not very secret, but I've invented it, so I'm saying it's secret. And it's essentially just a list of the most common things that you need to check in the most common mistakes that you would make. Is it in or it? Then, D, and D. There's all these things that have to match in regards to is it in or it. And I've actually created this little tree here, in, it, and flertal. And just from that alone, there's a bunch of stuff that all have to match in regards to that. Den, det, de, min, mit, mine, din, dit, dine, sin, sit, sine, if it's a third person, hvilken, hvilket, hvilke, and then all the adjectives. If you have any questions, by the way, just throw them in the chat box and I'll answer them. So, of course, you might not be able to have this list in the exam, but it's a list that you can practice with, right? And that you can, over time, be more and more aware of. If somebody sends a text to me now to correct, this sort of stuff just in me, right? I just read it and I can see it. But for somebody that's not practiced maybe as much as I have, it might be a bit more difficult. So, I often ask people when I'm correcting with them, can you see anything in this line? To see if they can themselves find it. That's the best way to learn, is to explore yourself. So yeah, there's a little checklist here, which you're going to be able to get. Let's go back to the tab here. Yeah, this is also a great one. There's two tabs. This is again relating to keywords. One where you have to search and one where you have to actually read. you don't always have to read everything. And I'm going to get onto that again next. But whenever you see this word "su" or "suya," du ska suya information, that just means you need to go and search for the information. You don't need to read everything, as opposed to "les," where you need to maybe read a bit more thoroughly, which takes us on to this thing of wasting time. Right? Number 3 was time management. So if you only need to search for information, why would you read a load of crap that you don't even need to read? But then the question is, where do I start from? Where do I start reading? How much do I need to read? How much don't I need to read? So we have a multiple choice part of the exam, where you have essentially 3 questions, and each one is a multiple choice answer. So where do you start? It says read the text, les texten. I would say read the question first, because there's usually 3 questions and they go in order through the text. So for me, it doesn't make sense to go and read an entire text and then go back to the question and be like, oh shit, I can't remember everything I read now. Really, you should read the first question, focus on that, and then start reading the text. And once you've got the answer to the first one, move on to the next one. As opposed to the other task, which is an insert the missing word or insert the missing sentence. There, I would say you don't need to read everything. Actually, you only need to read before and after the gap. And that might be enough information for you to select, okay, I think it's that word. Sometimes it might not be enough. So then you have to go back and read a bit more if you feel a bit out of context. So this is this thing of how much and how little, hvor how much time, how much do I need to read? Read as little as possible, ideally, to save time. And so you don't feel like, oh, I'm getting bogged down in information. For example, the multiple choice question, it's very common in the text, right? You have some kind of intro that's probably not relevant. Might give you a bit of a good background, though. So you could skip it, but you might end up going back. So in the end, you've wasted time. So it's really a sort of a case of practicing this, which you can do with previous exams and testing it for yourself. But I would say multiple choice, read from the top. First the question, read from the top. Insert the correct word, don't read it. Just go directly to the gap, and it might be enough. So that was number 3. Bonus tips. Before and after I've just talked about. So that's that governed. Odd one out is I've noticed on some of the insert the missing word examples that there's 4 words, for example, you have to choose from. And already, without even reading the text, you might spot that one of them is the odd one out. It seems different to the other ones. For example, there's 3 kind of negative words, and there's 1 word that's kind of positive. Right away, that tells me, okay, that one seems like he might be that. And I, of course, have to go and check, don't just assume. But that's not always going to work, but it's something that often happens. By the way, let me know in the chat, what is your experience so far with PD3? Have you come across any of this before? Is it making sense? Have any questions? Let me know. Those were the 3 biggest mistakes that people make with PD3. Let's go back a little bit and recap just very quickly. It is blah, blah. Too much fluff, not having any structure, going around in circles. You need to just be very simple, very precise. And you can do that with these structures that I've given you. Number 2, misunderstanding, asking the person to repeat if you didn't understand, or misunderstanding the question and not looking for these keywords. And then lastly, it's time management. When should I read very thoroughly, and when should I not read? When should I just skim, or when should I go before, after a gap, or whatever? Amazing. So now it is time for me to release my brand new course, which, of course, goes into detail of all this stuff. And it is essentially how to play PD3 with all the rules and controls you need to pass. So for everybody that's attended today, there's an exclusive offer for you. It's half price until tomorrow morning, and then it's going up to full price. And it's basically, I go through every single part of this exam. There's a bunch of bonus material, and I show you practically, using a real exam, how I would do it. And it may have taken me a bit more time because I'm explaining stuff to you as I go, but essentially that's the course. I give you all the rules. So a lot of the stuff we talked about today, the step-by-step guide of understanding the test. What is it I have to do on this test? What are all the different parts? And I do that by using real test examples, which is a complete outline of the exam. Then we go through all the controls. What cheat codes can I use for reading, writing, and speaking? I give you the structure, just as I've done today. You've already got it, really. Now it's a case of, okay, let's see that in action. Let's see how to use it and practice doing it and using this knockout combo to pass it. And then it's just a case of finishing him, which just means repeat, rinse and repeat. Practice, practice, practice. The more you do it, there's a bunch of these previous exams out there that you can use, and the more you do it, the more you see the same things coming in and again. And as a part of this course, I'm also giving some feedback, some coaching every Tuesday at 8 p.m. You can come, for example, with your written papers or with your leesverståelse or with your speeches, whatever it might be. You can bring it every Tuesday at 8 p.m. And as a group, we can go through it. We can talk about it. We can try to improve and maybe even practice. But essentially, it'll be a correcting, specifically for the written, I guess. That's maybe the trickiest part. But we figure that on the day. Why buy? Yeah, why not? You want to knock them out at PD3? You can do it at your own pace. You can improve, boost your confidence, and I'm going to be here to support you. So it's not one of these courses you just buy online and then the person who sold it to you is just sort of, so you don't know who that guy is. You know me, you have contact with me, and I'm here to guide you and help you. So it's an option. You can also take private sessions if you wanted to. That's completely up to you. But this is something that I'm really, really happy to get out, that I think is really, really great, and that will be very, very useful to you. So now's the time. If you have any questions, let me know. Or hit me in the chat box, or open your mic, open your camera, chat a bit with me if you like. Any questions? Anybody have anything? Anything's confused? Anybody confused? I don't think so. I think that's pretty straight to the point. So let me show you something. As a part of this course, there's a bunch of stuff. Here's one of them, which is a comprehensive list of possible topics for the spoken part. It's a very simple list that you can practice with. Ballform, Sundhed, velfærdssamfundet, kultur, arbejdsmarkedssamfundet, arbejdsmarkedet, miljø, ligestilling, lykke, kriminalitet. And it's some of the most common topics that are given for the exam. And you can see that it's often something with focus on this thing. Let's give an example. Ballformer med fokus på flytte til en stor by. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Some of the other topics are a little more complicated, like danskernes alkoholforbrug med fokus på unges alkoholvaner. Yeah. So these are examples of, I'm building some kind of argument around it. I'm using my 5-point structure to do that. I'm using my 3-point system to give the two sides of the argument. And then I'm using these phrases that I've been talking about to make it very clear and simple for myself. Let's show you a little bit on the website. Here, getting a bit of behind the scenes here. Here is the curriculum for the course. Module 1, leesverståelse. I go through part 1, part 2, and it's a video with me where we go through the exam. Module 2, I can't figure out which language I should choose. Module 2, I'll go with English, the written part. You have this email, and then you have some kind of assessment. And actually, part A and B, you usually choose one or the other. But I've just done both of them to the example. That's sort of a cool thing about this part of the exam is there's 2 options, and there's going to be one of them that you think, yeah, I favor that one. I'm going to take that one. Then we have the spoken part. So we have this thing of a presentation. Again, I break it down exactly sort of all the things we mentioned today, break it down with an example, and I show you a speak that I've done. And then we have another spoken part where it's this thing of describing images, and then there's follow-up questions. The last part is then practicing. Do a little summary here. There's a bunch of exercises, previous exam papers that you can use to practice this. The thing with all the different topics. What else do we have here? 3-point system, the 5-point system, the DT3. You have your checklist here. And at the end, module 5, there's a bunch of quizzes. There's 3 quizzes here, but I'm actually updating this all the time because I keep getting new ideas for bonus quizzes. For example, this one is just, and there's going to be a bunch more of them. It is basically just a lot of the very common words that you have at PD3 that often come up when this thing of like insert the missing word, which word should it be? Here are 4 words that all kind of look the same. Day blend, day more, day mill, day all. And this is just basically a little quiz. Choose the correct one. Oh, I'm not going to show the correct answers. Figure that out yourself. But I've given an explanation. So once you've answered, you also get an explanation of why is it that one. So this is the beautiful little course. Go over to my website. I can drop you the link here. And otherwise, if you have any questions, let me know now. Can we also find copies of old papers? Yeah. Oh, 1 second. As a part of this course, you can get access to all of the papers, going way back to, I don't know, 2011 or something like that. Yeah. In the course here, there's just, I think, 1 year of papers for each part of the exam. But as I've mentioned, in accessing the course, you also basically access me as your tutor, and I can give you access to those papers. But otherwise, you can't really find them. They're kind of a bit hard to find, I have to say. That's not just something to say. Believe me, I've been out there trying to find them. Yeah. Research quiz again. Yeah. You have 3 attempts at the quiz. Yeah. I think I've made it so it's an 80% passed in. But yeah, you can certainly redo it. My plan is, Lou, to make a course for each of the levels. This is really the highest level at PD3. I think it's module 5. Yeah, module 5. But I would love to do, and I plan to do, all the other ones. Studieprogramm, Studieproen, certainly. Studieprogramm, possibly. Yeah. Space, that's all I can say. Yeah. Amazing. Any more questions? How are you feeling? Are you feeling a little bit more confident with PD3 already? I hope you are. Well, if there are no more questions, thanks for coming. I'm going to drop you the link here to the course, danish-tube.com. I can just copy it here. Give me 1 second. How to play PD3. Here we go. Så tak, Lou. Tak fordi du var med. Tak alle sammen. Hvis I ellers har nogle spørgsmål, så kan I altid skrive på mail. Det hedder liam.jon@danishtube.com. Og nu skifter jeg lige til over på dansk, ja. Nu kommer der lidt dansk. Fantastisk. Jamen, tak fordi I var med. Thank you everybody for coming. And I'll see you very soon, no doubt. Tak for i dag. Vi ses.